We are going to move from a resilience to a natural brilliant state.
We're all here to move our Black communities forward.
We think our children have to have the best. It's all about discipline.
How are we going to discipline ourselves so that we're able to save, so that we're able to make good financial decisions?
Recognizing that there's a road ahead if you manage the road in front of you.
The decisions that you're going to be making today in your lives where it comes to money will affect you in the future.
Discipline is one of the things that we often learn, sometimes by our environment, or sometimes we're forced to do it, and sometimes we don't learn it at all.
Stores want to get us in and out and get our money, and that's it. It's a game, so you have to be really wise to the game.
Do you know what it costs to run your home on a monthly basis?
Good morning. Good morning. Roger, good to see you.
And a very good morning to you, Tika, and everybody joining us this beautiful Saturday morning. The sun is shining, the birds are chirping.
Yes.
And everything is beautiful.
Summer is almost here. So welcome everyone to our new cohort for the community space. And we're doing something a little bit different with this cohort than we did the last time, but still keeping in line with business and finance.
Absolutely. And we've got an exciting cohort coming up with over the next 12 weeks. We're going to be exploring different arenas and doing things just a little bit differently than we've done before, but in all sense, it's growth and it's forward movement for the community. So yes, we've got an exciting person who's going to be giving us the next couple of weeks. Tell us a little bit about her, Tika.
Yes, so our lead presenter, facilitator, guru for the next 4 weeks is Dr. Irene Enriquez, who is a professor of sustainability and economics and area coordinator of economics at the Schulich School of Business at York University and former co-editor of Business and Society. She is an affiliate research scholar for the Rutgers Institute for Corporate Social Innovation. Her research interest spans economics, stakeholder management, and sustainability. She has published numerous articles in leading economic and management journals, including the American Economic Review, Academy of Management Journal, Strategic Management Journal, and Journal of Management Studies. Irene has served as chair of the organizations and the Natural Environment Division of the Academy of Management and the Strategy Division of Administrative Sciences Association of Canada. She served as chair of the Joint Public Advisory Committee to the US, Canadian, and Mexican environment ministers under NAFTA. So we're so very happy to have Dr. Enriquez join us for the next 4 weeks and lead us in what I think is going to be a very fruitful discussion and learning opportunity on economics and the value to our business.
Absolutely. So welcome, Dr. Enriquez. It's a pleasure to have you here on Community Space. So before we get into your lecture or your lesson, tell us, what is an economist? What do you do?
Well, an economist basically studies the economy and the actors within an economy. So we look at business, we look at government, we look at individual decisions by people. And so what we look at is how does the whole system work together? We have microeconomics that looks at individuals like business and individuals and their choices. And we also have macroeconomics that looks like the bigger picture of the economy. So many times you have a macroeconomist working at the banks, right? Trying to find out where the economy is going, predicting. Not easy to do, but they have all these tools, the economic toolbox that allows you to do that. Now, the micro ones, they actually mix microeconomics with psychology. How do we nudge people to do certain things? How do we incentivize them? So because people, are human beings. But the other big thing we have to understand is people are people. We can't put them in a test tube, shake them up and see what happens. So things happen. They can act irrationally. So we try to explain that and go through it. And we look at models to predict what could happen in the future. That's what we do.
So for our younger people who may not be actually familiar of what an economy is, can you just break that down? What is an economy?
Well, an economy is like all the interactions that are going on between buying and selling goods and services. So in an economic, very simple, many moons, 15,000 years ago, the economy was barter, where you exchange goods. So I have I know, I got a beaver, I killed a beaver, I got the pelt, I sold that pelt to someone else in exchange for something else. So right now I'm working on with Indigenous history, and I'm looking at all the ways that the economy worked or worked really interestingly. So they would exchange things, and people have different tastes, and that's how it is. So it basically looks at exchange.
Okay, great.
Fantastic. Yes. Well, we're looking for, I think we will have some more questions for you as we go through your presentation and at the end. So thank you, Rod, for those sort of laying the foundation questions. So we all know what we're getting into here. I'm going to post in the chat the textbook that folks can refer to. I know your lecture isn't necessarily based on folks reading this book or having it, but I will share it nonetheless in the chat. So if folks are interested, you can grab that. And at a later point in time, if you think you would like to purchase or have a copy of the textbook that I've posted in the chat, please direct message the BBPA, share with them your name and your email address, and they can work with you to get an e-copy of that textbook, right? So, and we'll repeat that again at the end of the lecture. So Dr. Enriquez, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Now I'm going to share my screen. So if you bear with me just a few minutes, few seconds actually. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. All right, so let me sort of start. So we're looking at markets, incentives, and the government. So I'm going to start really slow. But before I start, I just want to get to know a little bit more about you. So what I want you to do, yes, you're going to have to do some homework right now, is I want you to go on so you open the screen, go on your Google or whatever you have, whatever your search engine is, go on to www.menti.com. Okay. So I'm going to go there as well. So www.menti.com. So this is where you go, www.menti.com. So when you're there, when you get there, I want you to type the following code: 77322870. So you can see that on your screen if you can, right? And then I want you to answer the question. Yes, answer the question. Start. The question is, when I say business, what are the three things that come to mind? There's no wrong or right answers. Aha, there you go. Come on, everybody, money. Come on, keep going. Excellent. You guys are good. I'm going to get you in my class, you know that. All right, keep going. Thank you. Keep going. We're 17, how many are we in class? We're at oh, that's good. Excellent. Excellent. So what you're witnessing is clearly when you think of business, you think of profit, money, marketing, wealth, legacy, greed, right? These are things that are coming to mind. Independence, absolutely. Selling, workers and bosses, all right? So this is really great because, believe it or not, economics looks at this. What is money? How does that money work? How do you save? Finance, for example, is basically part of economics. It's actually separated. It became so big, it became a whole new department, as you say. Excellent job. Now I have another question for you, another actor in the economic thing. So we're almost there. We're 14. Anybody else before I move on to the next question? Okay, so let me go on to the next question. Oh, very good job. When I say government, what are the three things that come to mind? Again, another economic actor. And oh, taxes. Okay. Ooh, yes, corruption. That's something a lot of people have seen. Law of the economy, absolutely. Excellent. Liberty, infrastructure, Justin. Okay, yes, leadership, liberty, gatekeepers. So, anyone else? So the purpose of this was to see that in business and also in government, you have rules. I mean, the rules also apply for business. And many times governments set the rules. They're like the referee in certain things. In order to get a business, start a business, you need a GST number. It's all about taxes, everything else. So you have to think about it. So government is very important. Businesses are important. And we as consumers and the civil society are also very important actors in an economy. So an economy embeds the whole thing, how we interact, how we get goods and services. How do we manage also this whole idea of rare resources? We have basically scarce resources. How do we do that? One scarce resource is even our human capital. That's scarce. That's why if you have someone who's paid a lot more, perhaps it's because they're even more scarce. We'll talk about that next week on human capital. But right now, we're going to focus on, and let me stop this here. Thank you. Great job, guys. How did you like that? Did you find that interesting? Right? Got you thinking? That's my job, is to get you thinking as much as possible. So then basically what this class is going to look at, the first thing it's going to look at is power of markets and how they work. The very basic of an economic market, demand and supply. Then I'm going to move on to this idea of what incentives are. Because reality is human beings sort of, maybe you want to do things. Why do we do things? We have incentives because it maximizes our utility, makes us want to do things. So what does incentives mean? What kind of incentives can help an economy even be better? Sometimes we put up incentives to encourage people to go a certain direction because we think it's necessary. And then we're going to talk about the role of government, the good, the bad, and the ugly. In the sense that, one of the things that came out when we said government was corruption. That is probably the ugly. But the reality is that, we vote for people to go in to represent us. And what does that mean? What is the role of government in an economy? And I'll give you an example of that, the role of government insofar as the COVID crisis, and some examples of how the government stepped in to deal with some of the issues, especially at the beginning of the crisis. All right, the power of markets. What's that? I'm not trying to make you hungry. I know I'm hungry right now. So what it is what is this? Come on, chat. What is this? I want to see your.
A hamburger.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to put the chat up here. So sometimes this is what I do in my class. Come on, I want to hear it. Okay, so it's a hamburger. All right, it's a hamburger, and usually you go somewhere and buy this hamburger, right? It's either McDonald's or some sort of wonderful little shop that you have. That's just not one market. That's many markets. So what's in this market and what's in this hamburger? And you tell me the markets that are in here. Okay, let's go. So what about this thing? What is this? Type. Everybody, come on, use your chat. All right. An onion. Okay, where does an onion come from? Bread, onion, bread, tomato. Yes, farmers, absolutely. So farmers that's a market in itself. So you have farmers who grow onions, and they then sell those onions on the market, and then the stores buy them, and then they go to restaurants. So that's an exchange. You have tomatoes at grocery stores, absolutely. The cheese, they're the dairy producers. Cow, right? Milk the cow, the cheese comes from that. And then, so there's a whole line of transactions that happened before that cheese got melted on this hamburger. Distribution centers, absolutely. And so you see that, and so you have the lettuce, all this stuff. So in this case, we're looking at this picture, and then you've already told me all the things that are going into this. And basically it's putting together this delicious hamburger together, and then you buy it. But behind all that, and this is where the book at the beginning says, who feeds Paris? There's thousands of transactions before then where people are buying, selling, transacting, exchanging to make this hamburger come to fruition at the end when you yourself said, I want to purchase that. Okay? So each of these markets have a demand and supply, which determines its price. Okay. And then basically a complex economy involves billions of these transactions every day without any government involvement at all. So it just happens, right? Just like everything else, you say, well, that's wow. And it's all based on trust. Have you thought about that? When you give your money, when you buy something on Amazon, for example, and you give your credit card number, what happens to it? It just all of a sudden someone rings your doorbell because you have Prime and boom, it comes to your door. And there you are. And you go, wow. But you know, that whole process is built on trust. There's no government involvement per se in there. So basically it's that invisible hand that the market's working, the supply and demand. And then when you purchase it, you're agreeing on a price. So that equilibrium price, that price is determined, right? Menu plan, oh, this is great. All right, so let's now say, let's do an example. So if you come into my class, I'll just say, okay, we know that we saw this hamburger or these cars or whatever it is. Let's look at a model. The purpose in economics of doing a model is try to understand why things are the way they are and how to determine the price and the quantity that's going to be sold of a product. So in order to do that, we look at this idea of supply and demand for anything, whatever. In this case, I'm going to say new cars, okay? And what we usually assume is we make assumptions at the beginning of the model. So what we say is, okay, we say that the market's competitive. What that means is there's a lot of buyers and there's a lot of sellers. Is that clear? When you have a lot of buyers and sellers, then not one individual on either side can set the price. Now, if you have a market where you have only one seller, that's called a monopoly. And they can set the price, all right? And usually monopolies are not good for markets per se. Why? Why would they not be good for markets? What would a monopoly do? If they're the only seller, what could they do? Anybody? Yes, the green market, yes. What would they do though? If you were the only seller of something, what would you do? Would you inflate the price? Absolutely, fix the price, right? That's why, you know, by the way, cartels are illegal. I have been, at least in North America, you cannot, that's it. The incentive is to charge a lot more, okay? So that's usually when there are monopolies, the government can step in and say, I'm going to regulate the price of it, right? Just in case. An oligopoly is when you have fewer players, okay? When you have over two. A duopoly is only two producers of a good. So this is what they talk about. So anytime that there's power on one side, they have the power to influence the price. That's one thing. Right now, we're saying it's competitive. That means there's not one person who has the power. So it's together that the price is set. So we have these things. We have the quantity demanded for cars that buyers demand. And then you have the quantity supplied that producers give insofar as cars are concerned. Then you have the price of new cars, right? There's only one price. There's supply and demand, but there's only one price. And then this here is the income of the economy, right? And I'm going to explain that in a minute with the model. And this PS is the price of steel. So on the supply side, you have inputs that cost money. So that's the price of steel. And I'm holding everything else constant. I'm not looking at any other variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to reduce my model to something that I want to try to explain. So let me show you a few basics in economics. The first idea is the idea of demand. The idea of demand is that when price is high, people buy more or less of a product. When the price is high, you buy more or less. Anybody? Price is high, you buy? Come on, thank you very much. You buy less. Now, I had one student in class who said, no, that's false. I go, why? I was curious. I go, because look, my son, you know, when those Nike shoes are $100, he wants them more. Right? So the price is high, they want more of them. I go, do you know why? She goes, why? Because he's not paying for them. The model of demand depends on that you're paying for it. Got it? So if you want people to really model this, understand demand, make them pay for it. Okay? This is what I do to my kids. You want something, you pay for it. So they understand when the price is higher, you buy less of it. So the idea here is really interesting. So this is the assumption behind demand, is that you're maximizing your joy, your utility, they say, by saying, okay, I have a constraint. I'm constrained on how much money I have, and I have to buy many other goods. This is just the demand for one good, which is a car. So what the idea here, there, is that you have this sort of this little equation here. So what this is the quantity demanded is a function of the price of the good and how rich your area is, okay? Now, I'm only going to look at the relationship between the quantity and the price. And now what I'm going to say is the demand curve shows a relationship between quantity and demanded and the price, holding other things equal. Excuse me. Now, what does that mean? Is that for a given level of income in your area, the region you're talking about, then the demand is going to be negatively sloped. What that means is, I just need 2 points to explain this. When prices are high, I buy less. And when prices are low, I buy more. So when there's a sale, you may buy more or something, or people will buy more of it, period, because this is the demand for the region. And so that's why it's called negatively sloped. That means that when prices, the relationship is negatively related to each other. So when price is high, the quantity is less, and when price is low, so that's the demand curve. We have one side of the market, yay. Now, this here is fixed because I only have 2 dimensions, right? If I want to see what happens when you increase income, well, think about it. Suppose I increase income. So everyone's now richer. What would that mean for this demand curve? It's not a movement along because it has nothing to do with price. So if I'm richer, what do you think happens? If I'm richer, I'm going to what? I'm going to demand more, or I'm going to demand less if I'm richer. Come on. I'm going to demand more, absolutely. So basically, if Y increases, your income of the country or region increases, then what this means is you're going to shift the demand out this way. And I won't talk about that as an example. But this is an example when you're looking at 2 things and something else changes, is a shift out, either in or out. COVID, what it did is maybe income levels because people lost jobs. So which way did it go? At the beginning, it went down. So demand, COVID caused demand to decrease. That's exactly what happened. Our economy slowed down, right? So people will buy less for all prices. How are we doing? Cool, eh? All right. Let's now look on the supply side. Now the supply side is different. The supply side is the producers of the cars. Got it? They're on the other side. Okay. But producers, I mean, they have to pay for the inputs to go into these cars. So they will produce more if prices. Oh, why is income level? Why is the income level? Okay, this is the income level of people in the country. Why? All right. So supply is what? Think about supply. Supply is basically related to the price of the car, but also the price of the input, say the steel, right? So I'm going to hold this fixed. I mean, I'm not going to change the price of steel. But if the price of the car goes up, do you think my producers are going to produce more or less? If they can charge you more, they would want to. They want to. Think about it. You're in business. If I can get a higher price, if you can get a higher price, you're going to be able to produce. You'll want to produce. Come on. You're in business. All of a sudden say, oh, before the price was $1 for this cup. Now I can actually charge $6 for this cup. So where would I want to produce more? What market would I want to produce more? Absolutely. You want to produce more. So this means the supply curve goes up like that. So at low prices, I'm going to supply less cars. But at high prices, I'm going to supply more cars. So you have 2 sides of the market. We're completely on the other ends. Me as a producer who wants to sell product, I want to get the highest price possible, right? Hello. And the other side, me as a consumer, I want the lowest price possible. So when you think about how in the world do we ever get anything done, right? But the reality is we do get an equilibrium, right? We come in, and this when the two intersect is what you call the equilibrium, and that's the price of the car. Okay. And now you can barter with the price of the car and try to get it down lower. So yeah, well, I don't want I want a different color so I can get a lower price, but it's still a stable price. I remember my mother first came to Canada in the 1960s, and she came and she was used to in Portugal to go to the market and they barter over the price. And then she went into a store like an A&P or whatever, and she brought the groceries to the cashier and she started saying, no, lower price. She didn't speak English, but lower the price. It was so funny. And later on, and she told me the story, and I go, what happened? She goes, they almost kicked me out of the store. She said, first they didn't understand me. But the point is that what she wanted to do is do the barter system in a store where the price is already listed. And basically she learned quickly that that doesn't happen here in Canada. But if you go to a market in another country, you can probably negotiate the price. And that negotiation is trying to determine the equilibrium. That's what that is. So in your case, you go to a store or you go to a dealership and you see the price of the car and say, oh, I don't like that. So I'm going to go to another dealership. So this idea of you voting with your feet and determining where you want to go. So this is the idea of demand and supply. Do you have any questions on this? Yes.
Could you just explain what equilibrium is for the people?
Equilibrium means, okay, let me go there. Equilibrium when the two meet, where within there, it stays there. So it's the equilibrium price or the price where the two meet, both of them. I agree as a supplier to supply that product at that price, and you agree to buy it at that price. So at that price, this is how much I'm going to sell. So if this is 100 cars at $30,000, I'm going to sell. So that's where demand and supply meet. That's where we agree. Right? That's what equilibrium means. We are equitable. I'm equal, you're equal, we agree. Cool. Okay, so we have a little bit of jargon in economics sometimes, but thank you, Roger. It's a great question.
So it's safe to say that the equilibrium
Yes.
would be different between, say, a Hyundai Sonata and a Bentley.
Absolutely. So for the market for cars could be different now, because now we make cars so different. A Tesla or even, right? It would be completely different. So we'd be different markets, all right? But usually if you have like oil and gas, right? The gasoline, that's easier because that's called a homogeneous product. It's everyone really doesn't distinguish. But when you have the marketing people come in and say a car is different, even though they may be the same, they still do the same function. They take you from point A to point B, but maybe they look different. They have different colors, different type of quality and all that stuff. Yes, you have different markets there. And that's the beauty of this, right? That we've now created really within a car market, you have different types and qualities.
Okay, I was also thinking that, that the word equilibrium also means it's equal, where they're the same.
Yes, that's so equal where they come together, but also that I agree that it's equal and you agree, because there's two parties to this. Right, the same. Because if it was above here, let me show you an example, okay? So if it was above, right up here, if the price was here, right, then the people will demand this much, but suppliers are willing to supply this much, okay? If it's below, you don't have an equilibrium, the supply would be this much, and the demand will be this much, okay? And in economics, we have places where they have floors, right, where you have this idea. Minimum wage would be an example, right? So suppose you have minimum wage, right? Usually this is the wage you have here, but minimum wage may be above, say, what the actual wage are. So I'm supplying labor. So I want to supply more. But the demand for labor from employers, if the wage is really above the equilibrium, what they think its value is, then you have this there. So the idea of being outside of equilibrium, the governments or rules can put it above or below, and they could set that. All right. So we're going to be talking about that later on in another. But I'm just giving you the basics first, and then we'll talk about examples. Okay. Surplus and underemployment, absolutely, Ariel, absolutely. And is this a type O? Now, the insofar, Charlene, good question. Low prices, less cars, high prices, more cars. Yes and no. When you talk about the elasticity, that means it's the slope. So you can have something, for example, where it's so it's very sensitive to price or not sensitive to price. And that's what elasticity means. So in this case here, you could have something where it would like this. So if I change the price, the quantity doesn't change very much. But if something's very sort of flat, it can change it a lot, or actually steep, it can change it a lot. So I change the price and the quantity changes a lot. So it all depends. So for a business, I want to know if I change the price a bit or a lot, what is the impact on how my customers are going to react to it? So if they're going to react a lot, I may not. So suppose my inputs change in price, and all of a sudden things are more expensive for me. Do I pass that along to my customers, but with an increased price, yes or no? So in this case, I want to understand the demand. So if I increase the price, do I lose all my customers? And if I do, then I may not pass along that price increase from my costs onto my customers, because I don't. So I eat it, and maybe my profits come down as a result. However, if instead, if I increase the price and I still have my customers, then it's okay. If my input, the prices of my costs go up, I can pass that along to my customers, because I know they're not going to run away or leave or not buy my product. Okay. So let me give you another example. So this is the demand. So what happens if everyone becomes richer? Yes. Okay. So what happens if everyone becomes richer? Now this here is what it means, that is this Y goes up. Now I'm only looking at prices. That's income level. This is your income level. Suppose everybody's income level increases for whatever reason. Okay. Suppose maybe the minimum wage goes up, and if minimum wage goes up, it's not only the people who have minimum wages goes up. For anybody who's close to the minimum wage, their wage is going to go up as well. Because you're going to go to your boss and say, hey, minimum wage went up to $15. I'm making $15.50. I now want $16, right? Or whatever it is, the increase. So that sort of raises everyone. So what happens then? So now if your income goes up, everyone's richer. What will happen for the demand for cars? So it doesn't affect the supply, right? Right? So what happens? Then everyone's richer. The demand will go up or go down. Up. Thank you very much. So let's see what happens. That's exactly. So look what happens when you increase everyone's richer. If that happens, then you can actually, the price level goes up, right? The price, and so does the quantity. You often now produce more. So this is the idea of that if income levels go up, it raises the opportunities for everyone. So if the economy is doing well, you're able to sell more and actually charge more, right? If the economy is not doing as well, then of course you're going to sell less, and then you also have to lower the price as well. Okay. Now, in the case of, say you're a supplier, you're now on the other side, the supplier, and now the price of steel has gone up. What am I going to do? If my very important input goes up, then you're going to see the following. Okay. So then, of course, supply goes down. If supply goes down, then of course I have to charge more, because I'm passing along that. And there you go. And then all of a sudden there's less that I'm producing as a result of the less I'm selling, excuse me, as a result. All right. So I pass that along. Now it all depends again, if you don't, depending on the two, but at least that gives you an idea. It's a model that helps us understand at least how economic actors work together. Now, this can get a lot more complicated. We can have different markets. This could be, and later on, when I'm going to actually put, instead of the price, I'm going to put wage, and instead of quantity, I'm going to put labor. So then I'm going to look at the market, supply and demand for labor. What does that look like? That's different. Again, another market. Now that affects us directly. How do we increase productivity to get higher incomes? What are the things you need to do that? And that will be the next week's class. We can talk about that. Now, do incentives matter? Well, I thought, any questions on supply and demand before I move on to incentives? And how am I doing for time? Not bad.
I just have a little question.
Yes, go ahead.
When you mentioned PS, that's price of steel, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
PS is price of steel. So if you go back to my, I'm going to give you all my overheads, by the way. You're going to get
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Everything is yours. All right. And so price of steel, that's so it's an important input that you have. So I could have put the price of tires or whatever goes into making that.
Is it essentially just like price of raw materials?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right. So, but I just gave it a name, but I didn't put all the raw materials. So I just took one important one that they use, the most important in the car.
So what would dictate the price of those raw materials?
Then that will dictate, that's a world price of some of those raw materials. So steel in this case will depend on the world price because they compete on sort of a world market for this. So it's not only domestic, but also international. Just like oil, the oil is not determined by any one country, it's determined on a world market. So the raw materials, especially steel, oil, are determined by world markets. And then what happens is that, so for example, right now, believe it or not, there's some components in the cars that has to do with the electronics, or in Intel and these other companies haven't made enough, so that the price of that input has gone up. And in fact, it's stopped production of some cars. Because some cars now, as you know, all your cars now have these beautiful stereo systems. You can even have all your iPads. I mean, it has more computer equipment than your computers in some cases, right? So these things have gone into these cars and actually reduced. So that's almost like a raw material right now. And now with batteries, when you look at the electric cars, those are going to be very raw. And that, again, you need cobalt and the raw materials there. That's, again, a world market. And they're running out of that material. So the price of electric vehicles will probably go up unless we get some more raw materials. And there's a huge, basically all around the world looking for these rare earths, as they call them. Okay. And trading and international trading, absolutely, in tariffs, that's what also raises prices as well. So if I want to protect a market at home, what I will probably do is put a tariff on a product coming in order to actually, so that product coming in has almost the same price as my product at home. And by doing that, I try to sort of level the playing field for my product at home. But that could create problems as well, because that assumes that the other country is not going to put tariffs on other products, your products, right? That never happens. When you put a tariff on something, they always put a tariff back, and it could actually hurt you even more. So I've written a paper on this where they have tit for tat sort of tariff wars, and that doesn't help. What a tariff is basically putting the sort of increasing the price of a good coming into your country from another country. China, US, absolutely are doing that right now, but it hurt farmers. And so what Trump did at that time, this is what happened when they put on soya and other agricultural goods. And so what happened was that China then said, well, I can also retaliate, because the two economies are interrelated. That created a lot of problems. But I will talk about it. One of my classes is only about trade, and that'll be exciting. Got it? But we will do that one. Trade is going to be an important class, and I'll focus only on that. All right. Incentives. Let me move on, because I want to make sure I understand incentives here. So what's an economic incentive? What you're trying to do is you're trying to motivate people to engage in certain behavior. I want them to do something, but they're not doing it now. These can include actions that increase wealth and social status, right? I want to encourage some sort of behavior. An economic disincentive is that you're trying to discourage a certain type of behavior, drinking and driving, say. So you put a tax on alcohol, right? Whatever you want to do, you do something in that nature. So let's play a game. Are you ready? Ready for your chat? Okay. I'm going to list some things, and you tell me in the chat if it's an incentive or a disincentive. Okay? Right. Tax on alcohol. Is it an incentive or disincentive? Thank you. It's trying to reduce your consumption of alcohol. That's what it's trying to do, right? Because you are buying many products, and because you're going to say, well, I'm not going to buy 3 bottles, now I'm going to buy 2 or 1. right? Because the price is higher. Thank you. Oops. A price discount on a product. What is that? And Michael wants to answer, of course, incentive. All right, right. But remember, I'm trying to get everybody involved, right? That's what the purpose of this is. All right, next one, tax credit on buying an electric car. It's a? Thank you very much, Charlene. Yes, thank you, Tika, thank you. All right, subsidy to farmers. They do give that, right? My farmers are really, they depends on the weather. Some years they have droughts, some years they don't. So that's an incentive. Excellent. Thank you very much. Look what's going on now. Governments, cities, and regions are actually giving incentives for individuals who have received their COVID vaccines. Krispy Kreme started a trend in March by giving out free donuts to anyone who received their COVID vaccine. You have West Virginia, the state unveiled a $100 savings bond program for the young people ages 16 to 35 who get a vaccine. They want to encourage people to do it. You know, you don't want, I'm home, I'm okay. No, I can get a $100 savings bond. Oh my God. The Ohio Republican Governor Mike DeWine offered an even bigger cash incentive, a chance of winning $1 million prize starting May 26. Adults who receive at least one dose of vaccine may enter to win $1 million prize. 1 million every 5 weeks. They're going to dole out $5 million. Now, you may not win, but you think, maybe I could. It's like, you know, gambling, right? It feels good. And that's one way of doing it. Andrew Cuomo in New York announced that New Yorkers who get vaccinated at ballparks are eligible to Mets and Yankees ticket vouchers, where the stadiums will be divided for those who are vaccinated, those who aren't. So we'll see. So this is an example of incentives to try to get people's behavior to change. You have incentives in business as well, all right? You have incentives for companies to do R&D. You give them tax credits. One of the biggest problems facing the world today is this idea of climate change. And that's one area I look at. And what the world will need to move away from fossil fuels to renewable options. So the question is right now, incentives matter. And so today we are dependent on fossil fuels. So we need to move away from fossil fuels and to get something that doesn't emit carbon emissions into the air, which is one of the greenhouse gases creating the problem. So you have basically the industry right now, the US fossil fuel industry receives $20 billion every year, 15 billion of the federal government, of that from the federal government of subsidies to encourage production. Can you imagine if we moved that money away from the fossil fuel industry and moved it to the renewable industry, right? So people keep thinking, but professor, you know, these industries are not subsidized. Yes, they are. There's lots of government involvement in some of these things where they don't necessarily need that money, right? So this came from the past and has stayed on. So these are the things that they have to look for. Ohio Free University for Students, I know, Charlene, isn't that amazing, right? So if you get that, for certain things, so there's lots of stuff going on. They want to encourage, if you want to encourage education, right? They're thinking of in the US as well. If you want to encourage education for college, free tuition, right? One of the biggest barriers to education is the high tuition price, especially in the US. Canada is not as bad, but that's something. Subsidies, at least cancel the debt for some of these people. Relate the debt to what basically the job that they get. These are all things, they're all incentives trying to encourage certain types of behavior. You want to encourage that. All right. And so I'm going to let you, you can actually go to Visual Capitalists. I'm going to click this on, I'm going to show you what it looks like. When you get my overhead, you can do that. And hopefully you'll get my PowerPoint directly. And this here is Europe leads in EV sales, but for how long? And so this here is like, can you see my graph? Can you see it? Can everyone see this?
Yes, we see the graph.
Thank you. So look at Europe. Europe's almost leading. It's actually sold more electric vehicles than China. And one of the reasons is that they actually put various consumer incentives as well, right? And then if you ever go to Europe, you'll find the cars are smaller, a lot smaller. And so it's really interesting. So they've actually really put in incentives. The European Union is really encouraging this. The US has 328,000 and Canada's it's actually 37.7 million, which is not bad. Now what they have to do is build up the infrastructure, right? You have to have electric cars, you need a plug, right? And everyone's having a different, so you need some sort of plug like this, right? You put one end and the other end with different options, maybe, I don't know. But there's going to be things that are going to happen here, which is really exciting. So again, incentives matter if you want to get the economy to go somewhere. All right, my last thing, and then I'm going to end soon. Now we are talking about what's the role of government. I know there's a lot of words here, but let me explain in words what's going on. Usually there are things, we always assume that markets are really great. And a lot of people say, and I believe markets are really work well. But unfortunately, sometimes we have things called market failures. And what that means is sometimes the market economy really doesn't meet the needs of society. All right. And so when managers in the market economy make decisions about how much to produce, they look at the price of what they will produce and the cost of producing it, like labor, raw materials, energy, and then they decide how much to produce. But what they don't take into account is sometimes when they're producing this, that they can create a market failure. So suppose I make something and I put some arsenic in the water as a result of producing this product. It's a market failure. And then people around who drink that water die, right? That is pollution, or even the air, or these are things that are market failures. But because the company doesn't take that into account, it's called an externality. It's outside of the company. So how do we try to make sure that companies internalize the costs in the production process that go outside and affect society? Okay. And this is called a market failure. And this is when you have a negative externality and then the government steps in and then they put pollution taxes on, or they try to put an incentive for them to change their behavior. And so another area where the market can satisfy is in the case of defense, or even in the case of things that are valuable to society, but will not be produced in the proper amount. So I'll give an example. Suppose we privatize that the market, which is private companies, do firefighting. Firefighters now is a company. I own a company called the Firefighters of Richmond Hill. Okay. So what happens is you have to, if you live in a house or an apartment, you have to come to me and buy some sort of insurance. Got it? Is that great? Oh yeah, yay. I'm making money, so I'm good. So I have all my firefighters waiting, and people have come to me and got some insurance. So when there's a fire, they contact me. Okay, I'm going to go and yeah. Unfortunately, not everyone buys it. Maybe they can't afford it or whatever. So the house next door gets a fire, but they don't have insurance. So the person who bought insurance, hey, can you come? They're next door, and I see smoke coming into my house. It's going to affect me. I'm sorry, I can't do anything about it. It's next door. How are you going to react? That's bad. There's a market failure there. That means there has to be some markets where there's not enough being produced by when you have this, where something that's very important for the whole society. So in this case, that's supplied by government, one entity that does this. It's via our taxes that we want. So in this case, schools. We have a very good school system, right? So we have schools, we have also defense and things like that. Now, there are things that we have that the government taking over that sometimes needs to be changed, right? Healthcare, absolutely. Look at the US healthcare system, very different from ours. We have a universal healthcare system. In the US, they have a privatized healthcare system. Now, if someone gets sick and they don't have insurance, they can't, they're out of luck. And also their healthcare system is linked to their job. So if you don't have a job, then you have to pay for something else. So it's really very different. And that's why with the Obamacare and people started realizing, wow, you Canadians, you have what? You could just go to a hospital when you're sick and you don't have to pay $32,000 to have a baby, right? If you're a woman, that's how much it costs, right? So these are things that are really, that we sometimes in Canada take for granted, but it's fascinating, right? So there are parts of our healthcare system that's sort of private, right? Dentists and things like that, we have to get insurance for, but that's something we need. So market failures, healthcare as well. We basically decided that we need a universal healthcare system because the private sector would not be appropriate in this case. So now, what about COVID? I just want to give you some example of what economists do as well. What we look at, see, this is the role of government of good, bad, and the ugly. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to look at economists look at data to try to understand what the impacts of things are. So this here is the US vehicle travel from 1970 to 2021. Look at that. So no going up and down, that's normal. That's seasonal effect, by the way. That's a seasonal effect. It's high in the summer, you travel, you use your car a lot in the summer. And in the winter, you don't drive as much. So that's why it goes like that. It looks like, ooh. So what this line here is sort of the trend. This line is sort of the trend that you see what's going on. And so what I'm trying to do is say, look what happened here. So this is moving total miles traveled. Look what happened during the COVID. As soon as COVID, people stopped traveling as much, okay? So COVID had an impact. So people started traveling less. What else did people stop doing? Well, air travel. See, the blue line here is 2019. This is what they were doing the previous year before COVID. Look what happened in 2020. This is here. Whoa, travel almost came to a standstill, right? Then things started improving a little bit. They wore masks, they tried. And now it's almost up to where they were in the US with the vaccinations. So this here already, this for me, from a big picture perspective, people are traveling, that has going to already, it's telling me that this is going to affect the economy as a whole. Because the economy, the gross domestic product of an economy, that's how much production is happening within the economy. If people aren't traveling, they're not going to hotels, they're not eating out, they're not doing everything. All that adds up to an economy that's going to slow down big time. Got it? So that right there, all those factors coming together already is signaling to me that this is going to have a huge impact on the economy. This is restaurant reservations. I have restaurants in Toronto, New York, Miami, and Houston. Clearly, Miami didn't give a damn during COVID. They were going out eating, and I'm very concerned about Florida, what they did. Toronto, this went down to, this is the change in. Is that clear? 0 is like where we are, and this is a decrease in. Basically, this is when they close down restaurants. This is what this is right here. All right. Now, if they had takeout a bit, but basically, this is all just shut down. Again, in January, they did the same thing where they shut down restaurants here. And this is basically, this is the reservations, open table. This is where this comes from, right? So these are reservations. They started in the summer, people started going outside. They had restaurants outside in Toronto, and that's what that reflects. In New York, again, they stopped, but then they started going back to restaurants, and they had these things outside. Even in the winter, they had things going on. And again, in Houston, take a look at that. They had that again. Houston's different animal, both Miami and sort of Texas. This is in the state of Texas, and this here is the state of Florida. Both the rules, if you will, for COVID were very different. They didn't really close things down as much. Mm-hmm. Now, this here was a signal to me that in Canada, we had an issue right away. This is year-over-year change in credit card spending, Canada 2020. And this, look, when they first closed down in 2020, in March, look at our credit card spending. Boom, just went right down. Fascinating, eh? So that clearly was a signal that people weren't spending as much. The panic happened, now things are recovering. The e-business, people are spending, a lot of people realized this time they actually started learning, you know what? Because they forced me to stay home and eat at home, I actually saved money. Some people say, whoa, I actually saved money. So it was interesting. So what did the government do? The government had to come in. They had some stimulus packages. I'm going to just go clearly some of the things they did. They lowered interest rates, and that's good for people who had debt. The government also bought a large amount of money and put more money into our economy, and they loosened credit. And I'll talk. And if you want, you can always send me an email if you want more information about each of these. Okay. This is open to everybody. If you want more information about what they did, I would be happy to talk about it and send you an email. They also put temporary top up for low income the Canada Emergency Response. If you're a student, right, last summer, they actually gave you some money, the emergency for mortgage. They put a mortgage deferral. Unfortunately, they didn't put a rental deferral. Many people rent. Some people said, why didn't we have some rental deferral as well? That's an issue as well, right? And also the Canada Emergency Student Benefit. And we're hoping that maybe the Trudeau government may introduce this summer, but we'll see. Vaccinations are going to happen. They're expecting by September that we're hopefully 18 plus will be fully vaccinated in Canada. That's the hope. All right. So, but one thing that we learned, and which is very important for everybody, is that the pandemic has exposed the cracks in our society, such as income inequality and the digital divide. It was really hard on many communities. Getting resources to people who need it the most is critical. And examples include low-income households, the homeless, women, children fleeing violence, the elderly, Indigenous communities, post-secondary students, and small businesses. They really suffered during this period. And so it's really important that policy take that into account. And so the COVID crisis has laid bare also differences across the world. For some African countries where there are weak social safety nets, people had to choose whether between hunger and health. And that's actually happening even in certain regions here in Canada. And let's be clear, what's going on in Peel region. I mean, the disparity, they should have sick pay leaves. There's no doubt that they should do that if that's what they want to encourage. And so these are things that are happening right now. And I just thought that they involve economics. There's a social side, and that's what economics does. That's why economists are always in the media, because they talk about really interesting topics and they can relate to things. So I'm going to end it here. My next week's class is on the economics of information. And then I'm going to talk about productivity and human capital, how to build our skill set to actually get higher wages and to actually this. So I encourage you to attend because it's going to be fun. We're going to talk about also information. What is information? Talk about all the social media and things like that. What is the economics of information? How do you detect false information from true information? And we'll see from the economic perspective, information vis-a-vis marketing is very different. So I'll tell you what the difference is in our interpretation of what information is vis-a-vis the marketing interpretation of information. How are we doing?
So far, so good.
Yes.
I have a question. So why would the Canadian government
Or actually, sorry, Rod, not to interrupt you, but could we possibly end the share screening?
Oh, yes, right now.
Bring us up.
Yes. Hold on.
And then we can.
I just did this one. I just wanted to see. Oh, I put a nice picture. I wanted to.
Thank you. And for those, my apologies, Rod, for those who have questions, please raise your hand or post in the chat and we'll get to it. So, Rod.
Oh, yeah. So why would the Canadian government at this point in time invest in bonds if the economy has taken a dive?
Well, you know, what the Canadian government is doing is that's how they put the money into the economy, right? And so what they're trying to do is put more money out there. So I'm going to buy a bond. And so say I'm an airline, so I'm Air Canada, and how I have my corporate bond, and that's how I get my money. And then a bond is called an IOU, right? So it's an IOU, and I know that maybe I'm not getting very many people traveling. I could go out of business if I don't get some money into my bank. So how do I get some money? Well, I can actually then say, I'm going to get a corporate bond. And this is the first time that the Central Bank of Canada has actually bought corporate bonds. So that's a way for the government, or the central bank, right, that they actually bought bonds. They gave from their vaults, they gave money to Air Canada to buy the bonds. And then they got a piece of paper from Air Canada saying, I owe you that money plus maybe 0.75% interest, and interest rates are so low. So this is a way for Air Canada to sort of pay their, their employees, or even pay for their hangars in the airports and all that stuff. So that's why they did it. It's really good because interest rates are low, but it also helped these companies. So these larger companies that are really affected, that have corporate bonds. So this is the first time this has ever happened. It's very different. They usually don't do that, the central bank.
I had a question for you, Professor.
Yes.
So thank you for laying that foundation. How does that translate to somebody who wants to start a business?
When you start a business, you have to understand where the economy is. Okay. So suppose the economy, sometimes I tell people, I go, if you start an economy when you start a business when the economy is really doing well, it's sort of easy, right? Because everything is, but if you start a business when the economy is not doing as well, you actually can thrive. You go along with it, right? So you know how hard it was, then you go through it. So the idea of understanding the economy, also you actually can look at forecasts, right? To know that things are slowing down. So if I understand, and I'm going to do that in another class, if I understand, I look at leading indicators in the economy saying, oh, this is a bad sign. In the past, when this goes up too high, that means things are going to go down. I may make a decision today to slow down, not to buy as much product maybe for my business right away, because I know things are going to slow down, right? So these are the things that you can sort of understand where it fits. Number two, you understand where the pressures are coming from, okay? So if I know in the economy that there are issues coming up from government, et cetera, I can actually then anticipate and maybe change my way of doing business as well. So that's one of the things you want. The economy matters because you're working within that system.
So are banks now then lending more or less just based on the state of the economy? I mean, obviously interest rates are lower, but
Yes.
there's, I guess, a higher risk in terms of people not spending as much.
Banks right now, they should be, well, okay, banks are banks, and Canada's banks are much more, how can I put this, risk averse than most. And what you do is when you say a good business plan, and then they say they're lending more, right? Because one of the things that what the Trudeau did, basically the federal government, even OSFI, the Ontario one, he said, we're going to lend you, we're going to allow you to lend out money. We're going to give this money, but you have to lend it out. One. Two is that you cannot then increase dividends for your shareholders. That's not what you do. It's to lend out for people. So they really wanted to help small business. So if you want to do that, this is the best time to go about doing it. Foreign money is right now, right? But you have to have a business plan, right? And you also, they'll ask you questions, for example, like given COVID, how would you deal with that? Well, if you're opening something, you say, well, I have a great online presence. It's like Victoria did with all the wonderful websites. I can do that. I'm going to go as well as face-to-face. I mean, you have that option. So these are the things that you take into account insofar as the business plan is concerned. But the economy matters, right? Because right now there's a lot of uncertainty. So your business plan has to include the things of how to deal with some of this uncertainty.
Great. There's a question from the chat from Charmaine. What are some strategies that up and coming entrepreneurs can employ given the current economic? Thank you, Charmaine.
Yeah, excellent question. What I found is that, well, today, for example, I'm going to go and order dinner tonight from a restaurant. It's a local restaurant, and it's amazing what they did. It was a small restaurant. You go inside and serve sushi and all that stuff. So what they did now, instead, they have the door closed and they have that, and they're still in there and they're doing takeout like you won't believe. So people are in there all the time getting takeout, and they advertised it for the local community. So one way of looking at it is trying to adapt to that. It's not easy, but the advertisements then become much more local, all right? That's what they've done in New York when they were doing that. The other thing is to also take into account what's going to happen afterwards. Sometimes our people are only thinking of today, but this is going to be over this summer. So what are you going to do afterwards? Right now, I would be thinking about, oh my goodness gracious, there's going to be so many people wanting my product. How am I going to deal with this? That's what I would be doing right now. So I want to inspire you, to give you this idea that our economy is going to get better. There's a lot of people with pent-up income in their pockets. Everyone's going to travel, I assure you. I mean, that's one thing I asked once in my class. What's the first thing you're going to do when this is over? What do you think they said?
Fly.
Travel.
They're going to travel. I don't care. Cross Canada. I'm going to go to, I don't know, Toronto. That's how far I'm going to go. But we're going to do something, right? And some of us have some income, others don't. But then there's going to be job opportunities as well, because now restaurants are going to start opening, and then we also have a choice, right? They're going to have choices.
Great.
So do we anticipate that prices will start to go up?
Ooh,
The
very
economy?
good, Roderick. This is called inflation. This is a thing they talked about in the US, right? And even in Canada, the government put all this money in, right? More money that's in this, and then people, more money in their pockets, they're thinking of. And so people now are choosing. And so when they start spending this, you're going to have too much money, the expression, too much money chasing too few goods. And then, of course, prices are going to go up. So is that going to happen? Not so fast. I always think prices will go up, but so will with incomes, right? You have to understand that inflation, they go up together. You could have some pressures right now because some businesses went out of business. That's the problem. Whether people are going to come back and reopen them, it's been rough. The worst part is the closing and opening, okay? In the case of the US, if you opened, you had to pay rent, right? If you stayed closed, you didn't. And so that opening and closing really created the problem. And that's where, from an economic point of view, you want to close help them out, get us all vaccinated, then open. This opening and closing where people get sick, and that's what creates, I think, the difficulty for businesses. The uncertainty. It's hard to make an investment into the future if you don't know. And the purpose of all these things that were done in March last year, and right, it was to basically, because believe it or not, economics is every single one of you. It's your decisions that help an economy. If you believe the economy is not going to do well, it's not going to do well. You know why? Because your decision means I'm going to spend less. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to invest in that. Every single one, you add all that up. And that's why many people, to look at what's going to happen in the future, you want a leading indicator how the economy is doing, look at something called consumer confidence. If consumer confidence is increasing, good time.
And how does one, so I'm a business owner or I'm thinking about starting a business, where do I get that information?
Oh, next class, I'll give you a bunch of sources. How's that?
Yes.
I'll write that down. Next class. Oh, I can't. Thank you so much.
I'm, always keeping tabs on time. Are there any more questions? Because I think we also want to leave some space for our community space discussion here, Rod.
Irene, one other question that I wanted to ask. So normally sometimes there would be a case study on specific companies and we can assess them further, but sort of like generally speaking, you mentioned that there are quite a few, and I know in the news we've heard of, especially in the restaurant industry, quite a few businesses that weren't able to stay afloat as a result of the COVID pandemic and many other industries as well. Just sort of like a summary, what do you think these businesses may have done wrong in terms that could have affected or that could have contributed to their closing, and what should they have done differently?
Well, I don't think they did anything wrong. What I think happened, it was so sudden. I mean, they're basically told, that's it, your doors are closed. And restaurants, food sector, the profit margins are really, really tight, as you know. In some cases, you need a large, and so the ones who actually did okay in this business were the ones that were the larger the McDonald's and things like that. But even those had suffered. So some of them, what they did, a lot of them pivoted right away and then went online. They advertised it, they put it in, and they sort of changed it that way. But some of that is easier said than done. But it's sometimes also you had to, for some restaurants, they had to tighten their menu, right? Because having too much means they have too much food and things can go bad and you don't know. So you have to have a regular clientele. So sometimes right now, what people are doing now is they're keeping sort of an email list of their customers, right? Because restaurants come in and out, but now people are saying, well, maybe I better know my customers, who my regulars are, and things like that. So maybe that would be a great idea.
So perhaps not necessarily wrong, but I think maybe some were resistant to change. I think there are many elements that have contributed to their downfall. So some were resistant, may have been resistant to change and innovation, resistant to implementing innovative ways.
Well, they didn't go on the internet, just like academia, right? I was forced to go online. Right. But I love TV. I mean, I love acting. This is what I do, right? So I like this. But my other colleagues were just, oh my God, where's the button, right? I mean, so it's hard. And so resistance to change is one of them. They didn't have the capabilities, right? They weren't online at all, right? So these are the things. It's hard. That's why we need young people to work with businesses, because they have the skill set. I mean, computers are like,
right. And I think that there was also that shift to a lot of sort of online purchasing that some local businesses did not implement. And online, and I think with that, you sort of need, a tool. You need some sort of, I forgot the name of it right now, but there's sort of sites like DoorDash, there are companies like DoorDash.
Absolutely, DoorDash, Uber Eats.
Yeah, so some of them
but they take a cut. The only problem is they take too much of a cut.
They do, at least 30% or more, which is unfortunate.
It's really unfortunate. And if I was a small business, I would get a bunch of people to undercut them.
Right.
Locally,
well, some businesses started doing their own delivery.
Absolutely.
That helps with their costs. But yeah, and that was just sort of like flushing out some of the things that they could have done better. And so in light of the time, thank you so much, Irene.
Oh, no problem, Charmaine. I love talking about this because this is economic and business.
I like talking about it too.
Yes, and thank you for those questions and points, Charmaine. I think it's a good segue into another question we have from Bertha. What are some hints on more resilient businesses to start or continue, or perhaps in line with Charmaine's sort of questions and comments, what can businesses do to remain resilient in sort of current economic conditions?
Okay, number one, your employees are your business. Okay, number one, so treat your employees well. That's number one, one thing. And people have, and I mean, they're trying really hard. They don't want to let people go, and it's right. Number two is realize that there are new technologies out there and try to be as current as possible what the new stuff is. And maybe hiring a student in the summer or something to help inspire. And so ask them, how do you buy things? What do you do insofar? What entices you? So for my daughters, for example, they were in a course that developed websites. My God, I wanted her to develop my website. It was amazing what she did, different things. I mean, get these people who are actually, find out if there are people who can actually develop a better website for you or for the organization and how to work that out. The other thing is that we also have to think about really studying and looking at the data of your business. When do you do the most business? How do you do it? Study it. Remember I showed you a graph of data of what's going on. You can do that in what your business is like. Does it do better in certain months? Why? What is it that can change in order to maybe get more business certain times when there's a downward swing? What is it? What is the reason? So this is like self-reflection of the business. And I know usually the entrepreneurs are so busy doing so many different things. You can always try to do that. And maybe you can have a discussion, a brainstorming session with some of your employees about what works and what doesn't. So I think the openness in getting that discussion, they can bring so much to the table.
Great,
So
thank
we
you.
have another question from
Yes.
Terrence.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, hello guys. My question is, do you see, what things do you see coming? Because I do think what I see is some of the older stores that say, you know what, we'll just sit it out, the government will take care of us, and they didn't pivot, are the ones that are suffering. What are the things that you're seeing that are coming down the pipeline that most businesses, I understand this, the young people can go into the technology, but what do you see is coming that we can do to sort of capitalize on this tremendous opportunity that faces us that we're, from COVID?
Okay, so I'm gonna go, this is my crystal ball. So I'm gonna tell, because I don't know, I do this when I say, this is just my opinion, my crystal ball. I really think that there are opportunities, but the opportunities have to come to understanding that the needs right now. When I said that there's holes, that the system, there's big holes in there in that system. Long-term health facilities and how they do it. I think if someone goes in there and does a really good job in understanding what the faults are. So there's a big group of people who are going to be older, including myself, right, going into this group. So there's going to be that business right there that's going to require, maybe because of COVID, require more home care, people coming to their homes, rather than these long-term facilities where they're in big places, right? So that's one of the things that we thought from the healthcare side. And you're also looking at from the food sector. I think restaurants are going to boom. I think they are, okay, once this goes in. Now the question is that, will this COVID thing go away? I'm hoping, and the other thing that has to happen is we have to be able to distinguish who's vaccinated and who's not. Whether they're going to require, one thing you have to as an employer is require that. I think all employees should be. And that's for the safety of not only you, but also of your other employees and of your patrons. And so those are the things that will build confidence as well. Now, I know in the US they're not, but in order, if you want to travel to Europe or anything, you have to have some sort of indication that you're fully vaccinated. And so these are the things that I think there's opportunities. And they're also in the tech sector. They keep talking about the tech sector, but the service sector really has a lot of opportunities when you look at this. You're going to see restaurants, you're going to see travel, you're going to see people trying to organize sessions and things like that. Believe it or not, travel agents are becoming something that's important because they want to have the experience as well. I know they went down because everyone does it online, but there are other organizations that actually try to put packages together. So those are things what I see right now, and so far as what the big things are. But the small businesses right now, everyone's going to come online. It's going to say, okay, how do we do it? Hairdressers, oh my God, they're going to be busy. Oh my God, they're going to be busy. You know that everyone's looking at me. Yeah, my hair. I won't tell you.
Experience, travel, long-term healthcare. That's something more personalized. People can pay for. Come in and do that. And
correct.
Again, young people teaching old people how to do stuff is sort of like key areas to focus on, and the opportunities there where you create it. So it sounds
where you create it, absolutely. We need to cooperate. In Indigenous communities, they have the elders, right, that are teaching the young. We don't do that. We push them away. We need to get them. There are elders. And they need us, and we need them. And then so this would be wonderful to have that sort of that discussion. Where they see things going. It's amazing.
So based on your initial analogy with the hamburger earlier on in your presentation, do you see it then, for instance, the industries that are going to be supplying the restaurants and whatnot, for instance, as good places to start to invest at this point in time?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's going to be, they're good. Farmers are going to do fine, the big ones. You're going to see that. Yes, hotels are going to do well. The airlines, if they were low, they're going to do better. They also had, they were helped as well. So they'll do okay. And so, yeah, they're going to, there's a huge pent-up demand. There's a huge pent-up demand.
Thank you. I want to thank you very much, Professor Enriquez. Looking forward to next week's lesson with you. And I think we had some really great questions after this session. So thank you to all those who raised questions. I want to perhaps bring Michael in, Roderick, just to talk about the BAIDS program, because I think some of what came out of this session is related to some of the programs and initiatives the BBPA is running. So Michael can make those connections for us with BAIDS and some other BBPA programs.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I got so caught up in the presentation, I forget I need to be a presentation myself too. I'm always of the opinion, you know, and those who have been around me for a while know, we have to know business. We have to know the language of business. It's not a sexy topic, you know, and I look at the participation rate today, and I'm hoping those numbers will improve as we go through the next series, because this is things that we need to know. And to sort of segue it into what we're doing at what we call the business advisory implementation development services, is that we want to meet the entrepreneurs where they're at, do a needs assessment together, and then provide the resources to help them to sustain, to grow, and to scale up. And the BBP will pay for those resources. But as the professor outlined, there are some target markets with the pent-up demand. That is a good place to look as we go forward. But if we don't know the fundamentals, if we don't spend some time to understand the economy, how the economy works, what are the leading indicators, what are trailing indicators, these sort of stuff, we are almost doomed to failure. You know, the statistics show that half of the new businesses fail, not because of lack of resources and that sort of stuff, but more because of lack of financial information, financial acumen. So I beseech my community, please come out in the numbers and participate in this program. It may not be the sexy one and so on, but it is the fundamental. And we have to triple the number that I see here this morning. This is, it's a good number, but it's not, we have done much better than this. And I'll do a little debrief after this, but Professor, excellent. You know, I've done econ at a very high level, but I never fail to enjoy when I hear the deliberations and the different things that we do. It is so pervasive. And you know, there's a parable I like to say, and I've mentioned it to Roderick earlier. Those who know not and know they know not. It's a child, and we should, well, no, it's a child, and we should teach them. So those who are coming to this know we don't know economics, and we know we don't know the economics. So we're making ourselves available to learn so that eventually we will know that we know. Those who know and know they know are wise people, and we should seek them. So yes, this is a good transition to that program. We also have the level up program, financial literacy, that we do on a Tuesday. And we have the boss woman that we do Tuesday night. And the second part of today, which we may not have a lot of time to do, which is the community space. The last cohort we talk about investing on the stock exchange. And we created 5 groups of what we call Ujamaa managers from our African word, which means community. And this is a foundation here as well. I was online yesterday with from my institute, the CP of Canada and CP Ontario, was online talking about sustainability and that sort of stuff. There are 2,000 persons on the chat from all over the world. And what they point out, one of the statistics that just stick in my head, is that 60% of the poverty in the world is in Africa, which has the greatest resources on earth. And I would venture to see it's partly because of not understanding the fundamentals of how the free market work and that sort of stuff, which is challenging us. You see, the poverty line is $1.90 per day. $1.90 US per day is the poverty line. And yet 60% of the poverty is on the continent. So, you know, thanks for coming today, and I hope the next 3 sessions, I'm certain this will be good as this one. but we'll work on the participation.
Yes,
Don't worry about
thank you.
participation. Word of mouth, I think, is going to work.
Yes, yes, no, and it's our first time coming back. So thank you again, Professor. Look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, Michael. Just a few housekeeping things before I hand over to Roderick to close us out. Please check out the BBPA's YouTube channel. We've been posting the recordings of previous sessions there. I don't think all the recordings from the previous cohort are there yet, but keep your eye on it. They will be there soon, as is last week's session is posted there now, and I believe today's session will be posted shortly. We'll also be sharing the PDF version of the lecture today, so that will be out for you. And if you would like a copy of the textbook, I've posted in the chat. Please direct message the BBPA in the chat right now with your name and email so they can connect with you to get you an e-copy of that. And I think next week we'll have a little bit more time for the community space to talk about UJAMA and some of the programming for the BBPA. So thank you, Professor. Thank you, Michael, Roderick.
Incidentally, BBPA will be paying for the ebook.
Well, yes, the assumption was that that's how you were going to get it. So
okay, beautiful.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yes, we just want folks to say they need it, and we'll get it out to them.
Yes, yes, thank you. So Roderick, closing thoughts, and then Victoria.
Yes. And I encourage everybody here on the virtual today to definitely take advantage of this opportunity. It's not usually that we get a professor in terms of being able to share readily the information and the information that not just that we need for today, but for tomorrow. And Professor Enriquez, I'm just going to actually ask you to do a little bit of homework, if that's possible, in terms of communities that have traditionally been underrepresented within world markets. What are some of the things now that these communities can do to prepare themselves for this new world that's going to be happening post-COVID, right? So I think what we definitely want to know where not just necessarily investing, but how we should be looking to not to spend, but to move towards in terms of some of these emerging markets that we should be technically looking at and looking to see how we could be a part of it right off the from the onset. But I just wanted to thank you for all the information and whatnot that you provided this morning. It was a great opportunity. And as Michael said, tell a friend to join us next week here on Community Space, the financial literacy program that speaks the language of the community, but also gives opportunity to community. And if you haven't shared your information with the BBPA in terms of getting that ebook, definitely get it. Let's take advantage again of these great opportunities to move our community forward. So on that last note, Monsieur Michael, anything last to say?
Actually, no, I think we are over to Victoria to take. We will see everyone next week promptly at 10 a.m. So we'll get started. Again, Rod said it, please post your email either in the chat or to the BBPA so that we can have the ebook sent out to you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Stay safe, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you next week. And don't forget to tell a friend to join us here on Community Space. Take care.
Thank you, Professor. It was a very good class.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great students.
Thank you all. Have a good week, guys.
Victoria.